This is where tradwives can get really dangerous because, we support one form of tradwife that we'll talk about in a second. But tradwives who are more interested in the aesthetics of the tradwife and embodying the aesthetics of the tradwife, they are incredibly dangerous because they do not actually care about the best interests of their partner or their kids. They believe there is an aesthetic way to be a good wife. And so long as they are embodying this narrative aesthetic ideal, they are a good wife, regardless of what the evidence says. And when I say evidence, regardless if their husband's unhappy, regardless if their kids are sad, regardless if their husband is spending his meager salary to uphold this fantasy that they've created for themselves, they do not care.
Would you like to know more?
So we recently did an episode where we were talking about archetypes of men outside of just the simple beta alpha male, because I think that many men optimize around different frameworks. And what I really don't like about the beta alpha sigma thing is it implies that all men who are followers are somehow like the lesser category, whereas I don't think that that's true. There are different ways you can be a follower. As we point out, you can be like a knight. You don't need to. Following orders, being a dentologist is sometimes a useful way to view the world when you are fighting for a just cause, but you are not the person leading the troops. And you have the humility and personal strengths to recognize that you are not fit or just didn't happen to be in the right situation to be the person leading. But that doesn't mean that you're not meant to play a role or that you are lesser. And so we go over that, and then Simone was like, well, what about women? How do women fit? And I don't even know if I've heard like an alpha, beta, whatever thing was women. So how?
Yeah, it's more like, are they like, what number are they out of 10? Are they a mid? Are they a tradwife? Are they
if we're going to build like a framework for women that follows this male framework that we built, let's go into this. But I also think it's interesting to us because we realized as we were building the framework for women, well, a lot of this also kind of applies to some types of men too. And so it can help people recognize when they're falling into dangerous character tropes and types. So do you want to start us off, Simone?
Yeah, I mean, so I think this is going to come to mind for most people. So if you're watching this and you're thinking about types of women, maybe one of the first types you're going to think of is girl boss. And I think this is because like when women stand out, it's often because they are the bossy one who has to be the smartest in the room, in charge of everything. I'm going to tell you how it is. Even if there's someone more competent than them in the room, like, no, they cannot have that. Like often I think they're eldest siblings. So they're just used to taking command. They're just like, no, they kind of have that, like, I know better, but also they often are in positions of like leadership or power or whatever.
Very different from male king archetypes.
Yes, they are.
Which I think is very interesting. They often come across as much more insecure, and their goal isn't often to be a good leader, but to run things because they believe that everyone else is incompetent or not able to run things as well as they are.
Well, I really wonder what's going on here. A common complaint on this, like where this happens with both like female stars and with female executives of like, oh, well, when I do it, you call me a bitch. But when a guy does it, he's just doing his job, right? Like, oh, so if I'm grumpy.
The same way or with the same energy often.
Well, but it's hard. Like, is it because the pitch of the female voice is higher? So, I mean, I wonder that, but I mean, I feel intuitively the same way, like I make the same judgments, and I just wonder how much of it is societal, or maybe it's just that like women are doing this from a place of insecurity because they're just not as comfortable fighting in that sphere. I just don't know. Like, I mean, when I look back at some female leaders, however, like historical accounts of Queen Elizabeth, Cleopatra, Catherine the Great, I don't get a girl boss feeling from them, to be honest. There's a different archetype, and we'll go and talk about that.
Not that archetype.
Yeah, they weren't. Yeah. And they were also acting from places of a lot of security and honestly masculinity. Girl boss, we chose the term girl boss for this because there is a distinct girlish and feminine element to it.
Right.
It's not a masculine bossiness.
Point out here that you can have men who fall more into the girl boss category than the king category.
100%.
You can have, although it's much rarer for women to fall more into the king category than the girl boss category. The core difference here between these two categories is, I would say, it's they are working to, like, the girl boss is much more in the category of type A personalities. They
Mm,
are working for perfection and perfection of action of the organization and of what they are running, and not working for a the community, and not working to lead or to earn respect. Earning
it's about having
respect.
things their way. It's less about having things the right way. It's their way is the right way.
Right. Well, and this is one of the things with kings that is very different. Is kings are often primarily motivated by two things. What I'd say is earning respect, but the other is an inability to take orders from other people at
Mhm,
a level of personal pride. It's
mhm,
not that they have trouble taking orders from other people because those orders are bad, which is
mhm.
typically what the girl boss. The girl boss problem is that they look down on other people so much that they just can't trust the orders of anyone else.
Right.
Whereas it's a fear of putting oneself in a subordinate position, which is one of the core weaknesses of this king archetype.
Mhm.
Um, One of the core weaknesses of the girl boss archetype is it's just not a particularly good archetype for actual leadership. Like, it works really well at high levels within bureaucracies, but it is fairly bad at actually running things of agency. So it's a skill that is really meant to rise to high positions within bureaucracies, but often not achieve real world efficacy,
Mm. Yeah.
which different female archetypes are good at, which she
Yeah.
pointed out was
Which
like
we
the
will get
Queen
to.
like that we'll get to in a second. Did you have any other thoughts on this one?
No, no. And I think that most people already have a lot of thoughts on this because it's also like such a thing in social media, but it's already something it's a dead
Yeah,
horse that
I
has been
guess the
beaten.
core final thought I'd have on this that I want to really pull out is this idea of when a woman is a leader versus when a man is a leader. And as the girl boss, are you embodying, the stoicism that the king archetype is often embodying? Are you embodying the sort of, and they just often aren't. There isn't a level of mental calm or a sort of aura of protectiveness that they are emitting. It is an aura of agitation,
Yep.
which is they misunderstand. They're like, why, when I am emitting this constant aura of agitation, are people not relating to me in the same way that they are relating to people who are projecting protection and
Well, not
endurance?
even just protection, just like security.
Yeah, security. And women can learn to do that, and men, like you often see this with alpha men, not alpha men, what am I looking like type A men, right?
Mhm.
Where they will project this sort of insecurity and skittishness, and it comes off immediately, and they too get insulted and degraded in the same way people of this girl boss category do when
Mhm.
they are trying to. And this is a problem, and this is where you really see this archetype, is when people in this type A personality type to try to dethrone or try to replace or upstage people in the king archetype. They end
Mhm.
up looking very
Pretty
sort of
damn bad.
weak and
Pathetic.
feckless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not ideal.
All right. What would you say the next one is?
So the next one that we discussed this morning that came up immediately was supplicant. So Malcolm, you want to walk us through the
Yeah, I know a lot of women who fall into this trope, and it is less a trope I see with men, but it's definitely one I see with women. Although it is, I've seen it like memed on for men, right? Smithers
yeah.
would be, what is it? What's the
Smithers,
guy
yeah.
called?
The
Doesn't
supplicant to
get
Mr. Burns. Yeah.
so
But I think so
they get
interestingly, and
to
this is
make fun of
interesting, is hold on. Smithers is seen as like kind of pathetic, right? But like there are Pepper Potts, who is a supplicant, although like framed as sort of ironically eye rolly. Oh God, I'm so much better put together, right? Like they sort of changed her from a supplicant to a girl boss. But anyway, Pepper
or
Potts,
girl
Mercy Graves.
with Lex Luthor.
yeah, like but like sort of this
Mercy Graves.
trope is more seen as like respectable, like a woman who assists a man and devotes her career and gains her power from basically representing the man as a proxy or the powerful person. And now, I mean, many supplicants we know, by the way, aren't just supplicants to male leaders. Many supplicants we know have worked with and for very powerful female leaders,
Mhm.
politicians, etc. So, like, I'm not saying this is a gendered thing. It's just that, like, but this concept of a woman assisting other people and acting as their proxy is much more respectable for women in media and tropes than for men, obviously.
Yeah, which is interesting because in the other category we're talking about where men typically have an advantage was this trope, whereas in this one, women typically have an advantage when they take this pathway in life.
Yep.
Supplicants are not, by the way, usually focus on their partner. They usually focus on whoever the most powerful person in their circle or life is,
Mhm.
and dedicate themselves to that individual. And this
Mhm.
can change throughout the course of their life. They don't have the type of true loyalty that somebody who is like a lifelong follower of their partner does, which is a different category we'll get to later. They are more just interested in who's the alpha, like the true number one big Chad in my life, in my world. And
Right.
I will dedicate myself to be a soldier of that individual. It's honestly typically a pretty respected trope. And these individuals do not necessarily make bad wives. I've seen really high quality wives who follow this trope and they will, they make a ton of money for their husband. Women
Yeah.
who follow this trope, if they are competent, typically are even higher earners than the alpha types that
Well,
we're
and
talking
some are
about.
supplicants to their husbands, right? Some are the assistants to their husbands. So that
No,
also is
rarely.
rarely.
Rarely. In the modern world, your husband would need to be extremely powerful for a supplicant to be a supplicant to her husband.
Fair.
Because usually if their husband is like moderately powerful, like the supplicants we know, he
Yeah.
gives them access to even more powerful men and women that they can dedicate themselves to as supplicants.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, so there is a benefit in it being outside the marriage.
Well, it's not a benefit, it's just an inevitability if they're not like locked in at home. But I
Yeah.
have not seen of the supplicants I know, I have never seen one cheat on their partner who are women. And this is something that people might be surprised about. They might think the supplicant archetype is one that is likely to cheat, but
Yeah.
actually usually not because they're pretty high honor driven. They're very similar to like the male knight archetype, but they're
Totally.
much more focused on a single individual, but they're
Yeah.
also much more likely to be dentologists and obsessed with honor and integrity. And they look for that in the individual that they act as a supplicant of. And so that person making a move on them or something like that to them would lower that person's standing within their eyes. And so you don't see the same risk that I think an insecure guy might think he's dealing with if he has a supplicant spouse.
Yeah, fair enough.
And okay, so would you say you have
So
any
I
final?
yeah, like if I were a guy, I'd probably rather marry a supplicant than a girl boss.
So what's the difference between a supplicant and a knight in guys? Because the guys can take on female tropes and women can take on male tropes. What would you say is the core differentiator here?
That yeah, that it rather than I think guys, even if they are following someone like Jordan Peterson or Elon Musk or whatever, make it about a philosophy and less about the person because they don't I think from a pride standpoint, it's harder to be seen as serving a particular leader.
That's it. I agree. I think that's the core difference.
Yeah.
Is the male category here is serving an ideology or a community, whereas the female iteration is serving a strong leader within that community.
Yeah, that's my thought.
And so you can have men in this category as well. So what would you say is the next trope? This is fun. Come on.
So you called the next trope brown shirts. And what this describes is that, and this is a trope that's been around for a long time, but and sometimes it has many different faces and it appears in different places. But that kind of busybody social policing woman who works very hard to impose her social norms on you. So the girl boss is really just trying to have things run her way and everyone doing things her way. Whereas the brown shirt is trying to impose cultural views, values, and norms upon you in a larger group.
The classic brown shirt examples would fall into two categories for people. I say the classic one is a woke person would be a
Mm.
classic brown shirt, like a woke person or an Antifa member or something like that. And then the other category would be like the tradcast, whatever wife who's like trying to impose her cultural value system and hierarchy on and things that rank you within that hierarchy, within people, within other hierarchies. And that they're really obsessed with these internal hierarchy battles. And what drives the brown shirt, the reason they wake out of bed every morning, the thing that they are most focused on is their status within a local status hierarchy that is controlled and mediated through social shaming of not following the rules or norms of a community.
Mhm.
And why I think this is a useful category is because often people only see it in the groups of their enemies. They don't see one. how at a lower level it can be useful. Like there is useful in sort of norm setting within a community and women who see it as their job to lightly shame other people. But when you get too many brown shirts within a community, then you get virtue spirals in which a lot of women just dedicate themselves to outdoing, being the most, and constantly looking for these small failures to meet community standards in outsiders. And that there
Mhm.
is not particularly any difference between the woke Antifa woman who's screaming about you not fitting X value set when you are not part of her cultural group than there is, but the Sunday school mom who's screaming at somebody who's clearly, not of her community, that they're not following her community standards and shaming them. And you'll know when you interact with these people, this the I'm holier aspect. It's not like if you're a part of their community, they're pleasant to interact with because
Mm.
they're constantly showing you that from the perspective of art, I'm actually the superior one, regardless of what they've achieved. So this is what's really interesting and what's uniquely feminine about this is it is a form of status hierarchy that they are obsessed with that is completely social and completely disconnected from any sort of real world efficacy or achievement or bettering the community. While
Yeah.
Knight tries to better the community by, or even a supplicant tries to better a community by doing things that help individuals in that community or elevate the leader of the community. The brown shirts are genuinely pretty unconcerned with what's in the best interest of the community. They're concerned with how stringently the community follows the rules, how much people outside of the community are following those rules, and how they can utilize that to raise their status vis-a-vis other people.
Though
So
they believe that what they're doing is what the community needs. Of course,
yeah,
if they were talking to you, they would tell you that they're absolutely helping. I just find it interesting that there really isn't a male equivalent, like someone who's imposing sort of like annoying norms on other people or being sort of like a Nazi about things is either probably going to be a knight or a
I disagree. I
thing
think there is a
thinner.
male equivalent.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Like the
So
bureaucrat.
I see them very frequently within like the fitness community. I see them very
I
frequently in
just see
like,
them more as knights because they're just like fanboys for like
but
weightlifting
they're
or
not.
for whatever sport they're
So consider the difference between a brown shirt and a knight, right? Like a
okay.
great example here would be like, okay, you are dedicating yourself to the fitness community and you're trying to elevate the community, right?
Right, right.
So you would make like logical arguments on behalf of the community. Consider when we have pissed off the fitness community and they've been like, oh, Malcolm's, how much can he lift? How much can he,
Oh
I'm
my
like, I'm not
god.
part of your community. I'm not part of your value hierarchy. Why are you judging me by your community's value hierarchy? Or the individuals who see our channel and they're like, oh, Malcolm doesn't look manly in X and Y way, therefore I can't follow him or I can't take him. These are individuals who are imposing a value hierarchy that I am not subscribing to and not competing within to me in an attempt to shame me into falling into their community and value hierarchy. And of course, as soon as I do, then they are above me in that value hierarchy because that's the hierarchy they're using to judge their value. Men do this all the time. I'm actually very confused that you are so surprised to see how often men do this. Within the red pill community, I see this all the time.
Yeah, I
Where
guess I
they're
just saw them more as knights because I see knights as sort of following a big philosophy. But all this is all
wrong.
arbitrary stuff anyway.
No, it's not arbitrary at all. It's a really big difference. Knights are fighting to
I mean, our
advocate.
categories are arbitrary, just like
No, but
Myers-Briggs
the point I'm making is
personality.
it's not arbitrary at all. So consider brown shirts are almost always toxic to their own communities. Knights are almost always helping their own communities. So
Um,
let's look at the red pill
okay.
community and you can understand why it's actually really important to draw these distinctions and they are not arbitrary at all. A red pillar who is a knight will go out there and they will do something like build an organization that is meant to help men in legal battles for child custody and
Right.
where there's unfairness in there. Or they will try to create an organization that is meant to help men dating. Or they will try to, a brown shirt will do almost the exact opposite of that. They will police community norms. They
Yeah.
will go around on message boards and say, this is what high status was in our community. This is what low status is within our community. Look at this individual who's not following community norms enough. Look at this individual who is following community norms enough. And they will also attack people outside their community. So if you consider even like attack comments in a different video, right? Like
Mm.
suppose you have a brown shirt versus a knight in the red pill community watching a video that is attacking that community. The knight will create a logical argument as to why that person is wrong. The brown shirt will create an argument that denigrates the individual they are attacking for not
Mm.
the aesthetic value set of their community. Obviously, the brown shirt is doing nothing but angering the public at their community. Like they achieve nothing by saying you outsider don't fit our value hierarchy. It's like, obviously I don't fit your value hierarchy. I'm not competing there. Brown shirts are always a negative. It doesn't matter if they're men or women. And I would actually say that brown shirts are one of the least gendered of all of these archetypes and one of the most holistically negative of all of the archetypes.
No, it's a now I see the distinction you're making. That is helpful. Okay, next one, which is probably, should we save our favorite for last? Probably. So we'll go on to signalers.
Yeah, signalers are different from brown shirts in a surprising way. So brown shirts are very interested in signaling to outsiders and using community status to signal their position within a local community hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Signalers are primarily motivated by signaling to themselves that they fit a particular narrative that they associate with either a life well lived or a good life.
So it's less about getting other people to do things that they think are appropriate and more about having other people see them a certain way. So it's still kind of coercive in that, like, it matters to them what other people think of them. No,
it's about seeing themselves in a certain way.
So they really don't care what other people think then.
They sometimes care. Sometimes and this is a really interesting thing about signalers, is sometimes they really want to see themselves as the type of person that other people see a certain way, even when other people don't see them that way. So I'll explain what I mean here. And as soon as I explain it, people will be like, oh my God, I have seen somebody do this and it's so obnoxious.
Oh no.
This is the type of person who you'll get stuck in a conversation with, and it's very clear that they want you to think of them as like a wise mentor figure or something like that.
Yeah.
But you have been ignoring them the entire conversation. You are just looking to get it over with because you're looking to raise money from them or something, or you're looking, but you are there patiently. Now they actually don't care what you think, not in a meaningful sense. They're using you to masturbate their internal narrative as a wise person who outsiders go to for advice. They are not actually, and they don't, like, if you question you, like, do you really care that this person actually just isn't paying attention to you? And like, I don't know, you're on a Skype with them and they're searching through Instagram or something just for, yeah, wow, that's fascinating. So that's honestly a less damaging iteration of the signaler personality type.
Mm-hmm.
The more damaging iteration of the signaler personality type is, or the most damaging, I'd say, is the narcissistic mother. Because many mothers.
Oh God, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
These are women who, when they are interacting with their kids, are using those kids to masturbate a narrative that they are the perfect mother. And they are not particularly interested in how the way that they are treating those kids is actually affecting those kids or leading to outcomes among those kids.
The most extreme example of this is a mother who is Munchausen by proxy, who really loves seeing herself as a caretaker. And as their kid gets older and no longer needs like diapers changed, they find some way to make that child sick so that they can continue to be the caretaker. That's terrifying.
I don't even know if I say that's the most extreme example. I'd say
what's the most extreme example? Oh my God, that's the scariest thing in the world.
8 Passengers is a great example. What happened with that family? That was a mother who didn't actually care about being a good mother to her kids. She cared about seeing herself as a good mother to her kids.
Well, she wasn't systematically poisoning them. At least there was that.
Well, I'm just pointing out that there are lots of different iterations of this. And yes, you have the Munchausen by proxy thing and stuff like that. But then you also have people like the 8 Passenger situation where it's very clear that her parenting strategies, they are not evidence-based, they are aesthetic-based. They are based around her aesthetics of what a good mother is like. And even when she saw it destroying the lives of her children, even when she saw her children leaving her face, pulling away from her, building up basically camps to deconvert her kids after they left the family, she still had no level of introspection. She just went deeper and deeper and deeper because for these individuals, the interesting thing about signalers is there is no consequentialism to what they're doing. It genuinely does not occur to them to ask, what actual outcome will this have? They are completely obsessed with the aesthetics of the way they are performing a role. And this aesthetic obsession destroys family units often, and it is really dangerous. This is where tradwives can get really dangerous because we support one form of tradwife that we'll talk about in a second. But tradwives who are more interested in the aesthetics of the tradwife and embodying the aesthetics of the tradwife, they are incredibly dangerous because they do not actually care about the best interests of their partner or their kids. They believe there is an aesthetic way to be a good wife. And so long as they are embodying this narrative aesthetic ideal, they are a good wife, regardless of what the evidence says. And when I say evidence, regardless if their husband's unhappy, regardless if their kids are sad, regardless if their husband is spending his meager salary to uphold this fantasy that they've created for themselves, they do not care about.
Well, so then let's get to the important part. Let's say that you are looking at a wife and she seems like a trad wife. And I mean, like, the problem is these people are often very good signalers to an outsider, right? Like, so how would a guy know if he is accidentally marrying someone who is going to be toxic in this way versus someone who's actually just going to be a devoted wife who really is who cares about outcomes, who cares about the impact of what they're doing?
Well, I mean, I suppose talk through it with her. If you're talking through, like, how do you decide between X and Y way of punishing kids? How do you decide between X and Y way of raising kids? If they're just like, well, this is the X religion's way of doing things or X cultural tradition's way of doing things, they are very dangerous.
So you're looking for someone who makes evidence-based decisions. And if you can't find proof that they make evidence-based decisions and that they will change their behavior based on evidence, then you know to be afraid.
Yeah, or at least some sort of logical chain other than this is just the way people who are good Christian wives do things. And that's where they become really dangerous because they believe and they're like, as long as I am doing the X, the aesthetic of a good Christian wife, it doesn't matter if my husband is miserable and broke and in debt. I am a good Christian wife. I am good. I am not responsible for that. And these individuals are incredibly dangerous. And I should note, so a lot of people hear this and they go, wow, you're much more negative on the female tropes than you are on the male tropes. Why is this? And I go, do you not remember that we named all of our daughters like gender neutral or masculine names? We have multiple videos where we talk about, like, I do not believe modern femininity is healthy. And as we pointed out, women can embody these masculine tropes as well. And I think that women are genuinely better off embodying masculine tropes. They are not the unique sphere of the masculine. They are just often the emotionally healthier tropes, and they are the tropes I think men gravitate towards more in our society today than they might have historically, because the gender differences in men and women gaining disproportionate power within our society, which they have right now, has led many of the more emotionally healthy, i.e. trying, i.e. sacrificial tropes to be uptaken by the downtrodden class, which is what you typically see in a society. And so they're becoming more masculine tropes. But historically, I think that these were often seen across genders in much more equal numbers, and that you really didn't have, like, it was understood that most of these tropes that we are now labeling as feminine were actually just seen as bad, and everyone knew they were bad.
But in the name of not being totally negative on women, we do have, I would say, the final female trope or type that we separated out in terms of what we most commonly see, I would say is more positive than any single male trope out there. Because what we're about to describe is kind of like the best of both knights and kings all together in one package. And this is what we will call the Viking woman. So what is the Viking woman?
Or I call her the shield wife.
The shield wife or the Viking woman, but doesn't necessarily have to be a wife. So what is this? And everyone, I think, has encountered women like this, both in media for sure, but also like in the real world. These are women who are extremely devoted to their group. This could be an ideological group, but more commonly it is like their kids or their family or their husband or a combination thereof. So common tropes of this are like that incredibly strong-willed, like somehow manages to make everything work, makes holidays amazing, single mother who's working with very little income and very few resources, but who have kids that she is just like, her world is for them. It is the actual real devoted trad wife who does everything she can, to like homeschool her family, with 7 kids, and to, be there for her husband and to just give everyone the best education possible, despite this not being an easy thing to do. This is, the member of a larger extended family who's able to secure a really, high paying job and then manages to almost single-handedly carry that family, sending remittances across borders to take care of elderly relatives in other nations, to fly out and take care of them, to do all these things while also, having a husband and raising a kid and doing a really good job with it. Like, so these are incredibly strong women. These are the people who I think of when I think of amazing female leaders like Queen Elizabeth, like Catherine the Great. Like these are people like, so Catherine the Great wasn't really that great of a mother. She wasn't really that great of a wife, but she really cared about Russia. So, she was the shield woman for Russia, and she really cared about making it a great nation. And it gave her a huge amount of resolve and confidence. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree with everything you said, but I would not agree that these women who you're labeling here are shield bearers, because the core aspect of the shield bearer woman is she is a woman who makes the safety and security of a small group of people her personal responsibility. But it is key that it is a small group of people.
I don't know if the small group of people part is key.
Or it is a company. The women like Catherine the Great or Elizabeth or stuff like that, many of these women are actually just either king archetypes or signaler archetypes that happen to have a positive understanding of their role. So if you look at Victoria, right?
Queen Victoria?
Yeah.
Queen Victoria was a signaler, but I don't think she was a really great leader.
She was obsessed with seeing herself as a mother to her kingdom, and everything she did was about masturbating that particular signal. This, or the Virgin Queen archetype.
Okay, then you're referring to Queen Elizabeth.
Oh, Queen Elizabeth.
Queen Victoria was a signaler, and she was all about propriety and having her family look a certain way and having her look a certain way. And she was incredibly in love with and devoted to her husband, but she didn't necessarily make life easier for him. I still see Queen Elizabeth II as being a shield wife for her nation. Yes, she saw herself as that, but I think she also really acted on it in a way that led to her amazing reputation. I think what makes a signaler is
about an extremely tight control of her narrative, which is because she was a signaler.
She
was not.
Her face with
you
admire
her, so you were unwilling to see that she had a view. So this is the way monarchies typically worked historically, is they raised signalers, but they tried to create a narrative archetype that was beneficial when these individuals attempted to embody it. And many monarchs fall into this signaler archetype, where especially female monarchs, where they have been given a good image of what it means to be a queen. And then they do everything they can to embody that good image from a personal narrative perspective of what it means to be a queen. A great example of this was the last queen, Queen Elizabeth. Complete signaler.
No, she's different. She falls outside these tropes, and it's because I think she's extremely autistic.
I don't think so.
Are you kidding? The horse obsession? No, she is extremely autistic.
She was autistic. I don't disagree with that. But everything she did was about filling a personal narrative of what a queen should be. And it was not for consequentialist reasons.
It was about the rules. It was about the rules.
That is what signalers do. They follow the rules, Simone.
But I don't think she had to see herself a certain way. In fact, in many cases, she did things to follow the rules in a way that made her look terrible and the way that she didn't want to be seen.
Explain. Give an example.
Policies that she made with her sister and other family members' marriage choices made her pretty unpopular. The way that she dealt with Princess Diana.
Was that not all? This is not a good argument here. Was that not all about following the rules that she thought a Queen of England and a member of the royal household was supposed to uphold?
I think a lot of people were telling her that this is unpopular stuff that's making her look bad.
It doesn't matter. It does, and this is the thing about signalers. Okay, signalers don't care about what other people really think about them. They care about what they think other people should think about them. It is very, very different from somebody who's in a popularity context, which is a brown shirt. Brown shirts care about what other people actually think about them.
Maybe.
People of their community and their value system. Signalers don't. They care what other people should think of them by their estimation. So I think that you're missing it there. I think shield bearers are very unique in that they are always a local targeted community. It could be their extended family, it could be their immediate family, it could be their company if they're, we're working on some small company or something like that. But it is never, or it could be their in group, but it's never larger than like 12 or 15 people because they are very, very community focused and focused on the efficacious stability of that community. What I mean is that, if you look at a signaler mom and you see one of her kids really suffering, she would be like, I don't care. I'm following the rules. It's their fault that they're suffering, right? Whereas a shield mom or wife would care. They'd be like, why is that individual suffering? What am I doing wrong? And I think that this difference shows where people like Elizabeth were signalers and not shield bearers. If her country was suffering, but she felt she was following all the rules, she'd be like, what are you doing that's wrong? I'm following the rules. I don't need to change. She would never change based on the effects it was having on other people, which is the core difference between the shield bearer and signalers.
Okay, Queen Elizabeth II did show intense reticence to change tack when clearly what she was doing was not working. So that's a very fair point.
Anyway, I love you. I'm sorry to be so harsh on your heroes here.
Oh, I wouldn't say Queen Elizabeth II is a hero of mine, but I do love autistic women in leadership positions. So
autistic women.
Yeah. I mean, gotta support.
You're a autistic wife.
Thank you. Wonderful husband. I wonder how many different armchair diagnoses we can get for you. You are not autistic. By the way, Malcolm is not autistic, not even remotely. He does not show.
It shows a fundamental misunderstanding of this person acts socially weird versus understanding actual psychiatric conditions. When people say I'm autistic, I'm like, wow, you guys are just like dumb. I'm sort of on the opposite spectrum.
Yeah, you're more. Yeah, so like I'm on the autistic spectrum. Malcolm is more on the schizoid spectrum, and that he like models other people a lot, like more than the average person. But he's definitely not on the autistic spectrum. Also, like in terms of like he has no food or texture sensitivities, no sound sensitivities, no transition trouble. He doesn't, like none of the classics are there.
Yeah.
You are not neurotypical though.
Very easy idea, very easy time when I'm talking to somebody telling what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people are surprised by because they're like, well, then why did you offend them? And I was like, because that's how I got what I needed to get out of them.
No, yeah, that's the really, really funny thing is people assume like, oh, well, if you model other people, you're going to be like, a Bill Clinton or whatever, like, like some person whisperer. And here's the thing, Malcolm does not give a shit about you. And he doesn't think very much of you. And that's why he says tone deaf stuff. It's because he does not respect you. And that is so harsh. And everyone has to believe and feels compelled to believe that no. It must be that he is autistic. It must be that he doesn't understand.
He just didn't understand me enough.
Yeah, like no one would ever be that insulting toward me knowingly. No, sorry, guys, that's Malcolm is. Because you know what? Quite frankly, and I'm so sorry, but he is smarter than you. He is smarter than you. He does know better. Oh, I'm so sorry, but it's true. He's smarter. He's clever. He's thought through this before. He's researched this more than you have. And he finds your pompous pontificating to be incredibly tedious. So, of course, he's going to start looking away, and then he's just going to walk away from you without saying goodbye.
Oh my God, you hate it when I do that sometimes. When I'll talk to somebody and I'll tell that they're dumb, and then I just start looking and will like walk away in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah, because when I go to an event, I'm the most dishonest person in the entire world. I'm looking happy. I'm looking typically somewhat comfortable. I'm looking interested in the conversation. The whole time I'm in more excruciating pain than you are. You're experiencing boredom and frustration. I am like, my hand is on a stove and that stove is on full power. And I am
but you stay engaged and you're like, you can see it in my eyes the moment somebody says something dumb or like the signals that they're low don't need to care, that my eyes just immediately go like start wandering around the room.
Yeah. It's
just looking for who I need to talk to next and standing there until
trying to get out.
Oh no, I'm gonna be the worst politician ever. I'm so glad we're running you for
office.
Oh
God, this is that is gonna be a really interesting challenge. What are we gonna do? with like all of the people who you don't find sufficiently smart and interesting.
Maybe eventually society will be able to respect and understand that they might not be sufficiently interesting to talk to me.
Well, we actually talked about this, and I guess this is kind of closing in on the theme of funny tropes and silly categories. But I want there to be a trope for a politician who absolutely and openly hates his constituents, but who does such a good job at making their lives better that they just love him and they always vote him in, and they're like, "Yeah,
That's
we
what
love this
you
guy."
want to be,
And he's like,
Simone.
"I
You're
hate
saying
you."
you're
Just
gonna be like, I'll
this
just
is
be efficient. You're like, I will be efficient and affable enough to be disregardable.
yeah. But what I like about you, Malcolm, is that you express on the outside what I feel on the inside often. Except that also in social situations, I'm just in searing pain and I want to run away. So it's hard. So
Anyway, I love you to death, Simone, and
I love you
thank
too,
you again
gorgeous.
for being the perfect shield wife for our family.
Thank you for being the perfect king for ours. I love you.